These things will ruin your microgreens crops, and I know you don't want that because you spent a bunch of time learning how to grow these things, you spent money on your seeds and equipment, not to mention all the love that you put into growing these little beautiful trays of green deliciousness. So let's talk about right now the most common issues you might face when growing your microgreens that could cause them to fail, and also how to avoid this. Hi, I'm Donny Greens, and I've been growing microgreens commercially for over 6 years now. This business has absolutely transformed my life, and now I have the privilege of teaching other people how to grow their own microgreens at home, and some people are even learning how to grow their own businesses. So it's super amazing. I've learned so much about these crops, and I'm just very excited to tell you right now some of the things that I've learned and things to avoid that could cause your crops to fail. So one of the most common problems and one of the biggest fears when it comes to growing microgreens is mold. Now, I've made a ton of videos on mold before, but I just want to cover it again right now because it's important. Now look, there's something you should know about mold. Mold spores are in the air all around us at all times. We can't avoid them really unless we have a perfectly sterile environment, which is just impractical. The reason why these mold spores don't affect us now, like, right, we're breathing them in and out, how come they're not forming in our lungs? It's because they're not given the right environment to really settle down and start proliferating into like a patch of mold, if you will. So if I do end up seeing some mold in a tray, which I rarely see at this point, and I'll show you how to accomplish that just next, but if I do see any mold in a tray, what I'll do is I'll simply remove that part of the growing medium, fill it back in with some fresh growing medium, and then sometimes I'll even take a food grade hydrogen peroxide like xylitol, and I'll spray it onto that area. But preferably you want mold to never grow in the first place, which is what I always aim for. And the way to accomplish this is really by dialing in your temperature, your humidity, and your airflow. So first let's talk about temperature. The ideal temperature for growing microgreens I've found is really kind of between like 66 Fahrenheit and 74 Fahrenheit. If you start getting too much warmer, it can increase the chances of the mold coming in. And then that can also happen when it gets too cold, because at that point your plants are kind of sitting in germination and they're not really getting off to that nice start because they're too cold. And therefore the mold will come in and start decomposing and breaking down, which is really what molds and funguses are here to do. They're very important, but we don't want them in our microgreens. Now, so if you have that temperature in place, that's great. Next is humidity. You don't want that humidity getting too high, because if you have high humidity, high moisture, mold loves that. Not to mention, your crops will be lower quality if they are very wet. So that's also something to consider here, but you want to keep that humidity somewhere between 40 and 60% is ideal. If you start getting too low of humidity, you probably won't run into mold, but you could run into some dehydration where the plants literally fall over because they needed water because it's drier. And then if the plants are too moist, like if the humidity is too high, then yes, there's more moisture and you could start running into some of these mold issues. And of course, like I mentioned before, the lower quality crops. That's temperature, humidity. Now let's talk about airflow. Airflow is pretty simple. You just want air flowing in the room. You don't want air directly blowing on the crops. That'll screw them up a little bit and oftentimes dry them out. But if you have air just flowing in the area or maybe directly by the crops, that's really all you need, because mold will proliferate where it has the ability to settle down and stay still, and then also having those conditions be met where it can start growing and expanding. So if there's constant airflow, the mold spores can never get that chance to kind of settle down and start proliferating because the air is flowing. And as you dial in your climate and your grow environment, this is really the balance that you want to find, the balance between temperature, humidity, and airflow. And if you can dial those in, you should have no problems with mold anymore, and you should be getting some really high quality, amazing crops consistently. Now, there is one other factor that I want to talk about that can really increase mold and just destroy your crops, and this is overwatering. Overwatering is the most common error I see in microgreens farming, and it especially is common with new growers because they simply haven't had the experience. For instance, when I first started growing microgreens, I couldn't even grow a successful tray of broccoli microgreens because they're a little bit more sensitive to water than, say, the radish that I was growing. And I was just overwatering and they were just bad. They were dying, and I can picture back in my mind how wet the soil was, but I just didn't know any better. It was so wet that I had mushrooms growing out of the soil. It was not what you want. So overwatering will lead to not only mushrooms, but mold as well. And it just results in a terrible experience growing microgreens. You don't want to be overwatering. So as you start learning to grow, this is the first skill that you really want to dial in, is figuring out exactly how much water your plants need. And by the way, I can't tell you exactly what that number is because everybody has a little bit of a different growing environment, a little bit of different materials, a little bit of a different climate, different elevations, right? Different locations in the world. So it's important that you really take good observations as you're growing your crops, take good notes, and really figure out what that perfect amount of water is. And I'll give you a quick tip right here, not to ramble on about overwatering, but it's so important. I want to give you this quick little tip. I water all my crops once a day in the morning. And by the time 24 hours goes around and the next watering comes up, the soil or the growing medium should really start to be getting dried out at this point and ready for the next watering. So what you can do to see if you're overwatering is you can skip that next watering cycle, right? So water in the morning on day 1, day 2, skip it and see how long into that day your crops will last. If they can last a whole nother 24 hours before needing water again, you're overwatering. You should really be only giving them enough water to last 24 hours. So that's my little secret trick or tactic that you can use to see if you, in fact, are overwatering. And you'll know if they needed water, if they start to fall over, you'll notice it in the corners first. They kind of just get weak and fall down. So that's my little secret for overwatering. Next is low quality seeds. Low quality seeds can have a big impact on your grow, especially depending on variety. Like for instance, sunflower, the seeds on the market are so inconsistent and some can be so bad that you just get these trays that are just covered in mold because the seeds were low quality. And by the way, I have a secret source of sunflower seeds, a connection that I have in Italy. So every now and then I'm able to get a big batch of these really high quality sunflower seeds in that are just perfect every time. So if you want to check those out, head on over to sunflowersuperseeds.com and you could buy those seeds right there. I'll ship them out to you. So overall, you really do want to be using a high quality seed source. So these sunflowers that I found are definitely the highest quality for sunflowers that I found, but then use a high quality seed supplier, somebody who has a good reputation, somebody who's been around for a while and who's getting good results for their clients. For instance, True Leaf Market is probably the most popular seed company, especially here in North America. So a lot of us use them. I use a ton of their seeds as well. Another great seed company to use is Mums up in Canada. I wouldn't consider buying seeds from a place like Home Depot or an animal feed lot, and I wouldn't even be going to Amazon either. Buy your seeds from a high quality, reputable source who's selling you seeds specifically for growing the microgreens you want to grow. And by the way, in addition to the sunflower super seeds I just mentioned, I provide links to all the seeds, supplies, equipment, everything that I'm using. I also link below. That way you can have quick access to it and you don't have to go around wondering what to use. All the stuff that I use is right below if you want to use that too. So there you have it. You know how your microgreens crops could potentially get ruined and also how to avoid some of these terrible mistakes that you could be making. If you're watching this, you must be interested in growing microgreens. So to help as many people learn this incredible skill, I'm launching a program that guarantees your success in growing microgreens. You're going to be growing them right from your own home, and it's going to take you only 10 days, and I'm going to be sitting there walking you through step by step, ensuring that you have a successful crop and amazing first experience growing microgreens at home, or maybe even you want to start a business one day. This is a great way to get started and really master the growing process, which is the most important part of this business, right? Is mastering that growing and making sure that you can produce a high quality product for your customers. So I'm going to link that below as well, or you can simply go to onetrayaway.com. I'll see you there.